Welcome to Mortification of Spin, a casual conversation about things that count, with Carl Trueman and Todd Pruitt, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. Let's join this week's conversation.
Welcome to Mortification of Spin. My name's Carl Trueman, and unusually today I am flying solo. And the reason I'm flying solo is that Todd Pruitt has had to bow out of co-hosting because he is a guest on a very important podcast. So it's my pleasure today as I fly solo to introduce the guest I have. His name is the Reverend Todd Pruitt. He is pastor of Covenant Presbyterian Church in Harrisonburg, Virginia, right in the heart of the beautiful Shenandoah Valley. Todd, great to have you on the show.
It's good to be on, Carl. What does it feel like to interview someone of my, my notability, my visibility, the kind of impact I have?
I'd say it's a humbling experience. It certainly brings home to me all of my own personal shortcomings and inadequacies as I compare myself to you in all of your glory. It could well be actually the high point of my career. You know, for many years I've been wanting to interview you on your book on baptism, but I've finally given up on that being published.
Yeah, I was just going to warn everybody that the reason why we're doing this is not because I've written a book.
No. I think most of our listeners probably guessed that, actually.
What I've found about writing really well, if you want to write really well, of course, Carl, you know this by now, obviously, but if you want to write really well, it requires sitting down for long periods of time and getting really frustrated.
Yeah, yes. Although I adopt the Hemingway approach of knock off a few hundred words first thing every morning.
Right.
Yeah. And if half of them are rubbish, you've still got
there you go.
100 decent words.
That's right. So maybe there's hope for me at some point.
But seriously, it did occur to me earlier today, we've never actually interviewed you on the podcast. You've interviewed me because I do write books and fulfill my obligations to publishers. You've interviewed me a few times. But it struck me that you and I are the same age. We're now in probably the latter part of our professional careers.
Exactly.
We have quite a few decades behind us in our various callings. And I wanted to ask you, as somebody who's pastored in a number of different contexts, a number of different types of churches, has undergone some theological development himself over the years. I still remember, by the way, that the day that I told Fred Zaspel that you had become a Presbyterian, and he sent me an email back and he said, "You have an ugly mouth," was how he commented to me. So if you're out there listening, Fred, that was one of the great days of my life. What changes have you seen in terms of the challenges that pastors face? You've been a pastor now for over 30 years. What are the changes in the challenges that you've seen over the years as a pastor?
It's harder in terms of the kinds of conversations I have, the kinds of things pastors have to navigate in terms of issues that people are dealing with. So for instance, when I was a youth pastor, I can count on one hand, and this was 10 years of youth ministry, almost 11 years of youth ministry. I can count on one hand the number of conversations I had with kids who were struggling with any kind of issue related to gender confusion or even homosexuality. I had a couple of conversations over those years, but just a very few. Well, all that's changed now. The other thing I'd say is that, and I'm not sure if this is so much something that's new as much as there's just a fresh emboldenment, that the kind of criticism that pastors get now have all new directions that it can come from that we didn't have 20 and 30 years ago. So, pastors can now be criticized and slandered on social media, these kinds of things. The avenues for criticism that people have to level at and that's not because I'm pastoring a church where I get a lot of criticism. Fortunately, for a dozen years, I've been in a church that blesses me and my family regularly in really, really wonderful ways. But I have had lots of conversations with pastors who've seen church members who get sideways with them and behave really poorly, take to things like social media, and the quickness with which a pastor's reputation can be harmed is now, light speed. Versus when, in the mid and late 90s, you actually kind of had to have conversations with people about how rotten your pastor was.
Yeah, it took a certain amount of physical courage.
That's right.
For the critics to operate as critics.
That's right. And now the ease with which people who are not well-meaning can do a lot of harm to a pastor, has increased exponentially.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, we've talked about this a number of times, but I'm very struck by the fact that, there is a veritable abuse industry out there focused on the way pastors or the church have abused people. Sometimes it doesn't amount to much more than the pastor having called out somebody's sin from the pulpit. Other times it's very serious and genuine abuse, but the whole notion of victim has become highly inflated.
Yes.
It's a tough time to be a pastor.
It is, and I've had several conversations just over the last few months of pastors who have been absolutely shocked at some allegations of bullying, that kind of thing, that have been made against them, and all they can trace it back to are things like, well, they had to tell this church member no on something, and again, as you and I have acknowledged, we know that there are such a thing as bad pastors. These conversations I've had are with good pastors, faithful men. And the ease with which a reputation can be, at minimum, seriously impacted, if not ruined. It's very easy now. Social media has made that possible. The allegation industrial complex, with everything that's necessary, like calling out truly abusive, evil pastors, that's necessary. But we're also sinners, and so piggybacking on that are bad actors who slander good pastors. And it happens every day. We don't hear much from them, but it happens every day.
Yeah. And I've said before, I've met many lay Christians who have nothing but good things to say about the pastors they've had.
Right.
I've never met a pastor who has not been subject to some degree of abuse from a congregant or from congregants at some moment in time.
Right.
So I actually think the time is ripe for somebody to write a book on congregants abusing pastors.
I read a book that's gotten a lot of traction among evangelicals, and I'm sorry to say in my own denomination, on pastors as narcissists. Now, are there pastors who are narcissists? I guess so.
Yeah, there are CPAs who are narcissists.
Exactly.
As well,
there's doctors who are narcissists. There's housewives who are narcissists. There's whatever. But as I was reading that book, the thing that that occurred to me was that it was so general but so definitive that anyone who actually endeavors to lead a group of people could fit the description that this man has in his book. And I thought about the challenges of leading a church, which are very, very strange, because a pastor is asked to lead the people who are paying his salary, which is just an odd, sometimes uncomfortable dynamic. Now, I serve in a church where my people don't make that weird for me.
Yeah.
And thank God for them. I do know what it's like to serve in a church where that does become an issue, where you are called in an elder meeting, you are called my employee, quote. And so it's very difficult to lead in a situation like that sometimes, because it should be a challenge because the church isn't like anything else. But what do you do as a pastor when you're being criticized by people, and in some cases criticized in a way that's not healthy and not God-honoring? How do you address that when you have, I hate to put it like this, when you have no leverage, basically. And anybody going into pastoral ministry needs to just realize that they're not going to be a CEO. They can't just push a button on someone and make them go away. And they're going to have some leadership challenges that are going to be very unique. Peter Drucker, the late leadership guru out of, I forget if he was out of Harvard University or what, but he had a famous list of 10 impossible jobs. And among the 10 impossible jobs he listed as pastor. Now, I'm not one of those guys that says a pastor is the hardest job in the world, because it's not. There are men in my church, I wouldn't take their job. I was going to say for any amount of money, but we could probably negotiate. But I know of jobs that I would not want to do. I have a headmaster of a Christian school who's a member of my church. I don't want his job. I get a whole lot more encouragement than he does. Nobody stops him routinely and says, "Great job headmastering today." But people say routinely very, very kind things to me. So I'm not a guy who says, being a pastor.
That surprises me, actually. But
exactly. But are
these scary people we should be worried about?
Very
in the
frightening
community,
people. Very frightening people. But I'm not a guy who says being a pastor is the hardest job in the world, because it's not. However, it is, I think, one of the weirdest leadership challenges. And a lot of guys who train for ministry, they don't spend a whole lot of time developing leadership skills, right? And we have a lot of guys who come out of seminary, man, they're ready. They want to preach, they want to administer the sacraments, and they know that there's going to be conflicts and that kind of thing, but there's a big difference between knowing it's going to happen and having to wade into it. And then they realize 20 hours of their week was spent navigating 5 different conflicts.
It's there are some things you can only learn through experience.
Right.
You can be prepared for them in that they're coming.
Right.
But you have to learn through experience.
When people fault, we were talking about this earlier, when people fault seminary, they didn't teach me how to handle conflict. Well, of course they don't, because you can't learn that in a classroom.
No.
You have to get on the field to know how to handle someone who decides that you dance with the devil every night, and you have to try to prove to him that you don't.
And it applies to almost any job. If you're going to be a surgeon, how do you become a great surgeon? Ultimately, you got to cut somebody open.
Right.
You can look at pictures, you can watch YouTube videos, but you got to do it yourself at some point. So, where do in terms of taking flack, taking criticism from congregants, Presbyterianism, we have a formal structure.
Yes.
We gather as presbyteries. My experience of presbyteries has always been that they're sort of fairly formal, business-oriented things. More important, I think, are friends. And friends are not necessarily formally connected to you via a presbytery or something. How have friends played out as a useful way of handling the day-to-day aggravation that comes your way as a pastor?
Well, essential. Essential. So
any particular friends?
No, I don't have any personally, but I've heard it's essential. So this was a lesson that I learned the hard way early on in ministry, and I only got the language for it in the last few years. I read somewhere, and now I forget where. But there's a difference between allies and confidants. Allies are great to have. You need allies. These are people who you're fond of, they're fond of you, you're on the same page, you've got the same goals, you're working for the same thing. And you can have good, pleasant, friendly, get coffee with them, that kind of thing. But they're probably not going to be people you want to tell everything to. Not because there's something wrong with them, but the thing that I found is that I remember when I was a youth minister, and my pastor one day said to me, "Todd, you can't have close friends. And what he was talking, the language of confidants. You can't have close friends who are members of the church. And I was still young, and I thought that was a cynical, ridiculous answer, and I pitied him for being so unspiritual. But he was right. He was right. What he meant was, Todd, you can have friends in the church. You can have lots of good friendships with people that you have good Christian fellowship with. That's yes, by all means, yes. But in terms of confidants, if you as their pastor begin to confess sin to them, it's going to usually scandalize them in a way that they're going to have a very hard time navigating.
Interesting, yeah.
And again, does every member of my church know I'm a sinner? Of course. Does every member of my church know I'm a flawed man? Of course. But it's one thing to know that, and it's another thing to be around Todd on a day when he's really grumpy. Then suddenly, and if that's hard for them, I can't just blow it off and say, well, you knew I wasn't perfect. Well, no, I mean, that's hard for a person when they see their pastor behave in a way that maybe is a little sinful. That's just hard. Now, in any church, any lay members, church members who are going, oh, no, I can handle that. I just want to say, I'm not sure you can. And again, that's not a criticism. It's just a statement of reality. I would have a hard time, and I did as a youth pastor. I had a hard time when my pastor, who I liked a lot, kind of sinned a little bit around me. That was hard. So have lots of allies in your church, people who you're very fond of, who you spend time with, absolutely. But your confidants, I think typically, I'm not going to present a law here, but typically need to be from outside your church. And so, I have two groups of guys who I'm in pretty much daily contact with by text, and then we see each other periodically. We do some Zoom calls. So, Carl, you and I and Kevin DeYoung and Matt UC, we text each other every day. Sometimes it's just funny stuff. Sometimes we send a book recommendation. Sometimes we send an article. Sometimes we tease each other about something.
Sometimes you send one of those woke pastor clips that always make me laugh.
I love to send
pastors. Was it pastors with props?
Pastors with props. You've got to check out pastors with props. It's very good. Yeah. So I love to send those to these guys. But those, and there are things I've shared with Carl that I might not say to that I wouldn't say to every single person in my church. There's another group of guys, PCA pastors. There's 6 of us. And we text every day, and Carl, you know several of these guys. We text every day. We do a monthly Zoom call. We get together several times during the year at conferences for dinner and that sort of thing. And these are guys I share deep stuff with. That I wouldn't want to burden every person in my church with. So I say that to say, pastors, enjoy your allies, cultivate your allies, men and women who, for good reason, trust you and you're able to lead, you're able to preach to with integrity. But that level of confidence, don't burden your church with every one of your sins. I think there's a level of things, I've talked to my church about, things like, hey, I was really struggling last week on this particular day. I really struggled with anger, I've shared, hey, there are times when I've really struggled with anxiety. I've shared that with my church. But I'm not going to share with my congregation every temptation that comes to mind at any given moment, because I think that would be not kind to them.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And it's not that we're trying to project that we are better than we are. Again, I've been at my church for 12 years now. They know so many of my quirks, and they know some of my sins. The men and women who work with me on our church staff as pastors and as ministry directors and office staff have seen me grumpy. They've seen me critical. They've seen me anxious. They've seen unattractive things in me, and I think that's good because they are a part of my Christian community. But there are some things I'll only say to my wife. There are some things I'll only say to you and Matt and some other pastors who I know. Yeah. Because I think to go to a certain degree places a burden on the people I'm called to serve that they shouldn't have to bear. You know.
Change of tack. You studied, because you were for many years Baptist.
Yes.
You studied at Midwestern Baptist Seminary, which of course is now a very fine seminary under the leadership of Jason Allen. It's got stellar faculty like
Matthew Barrett,
Tommy Kidd, good guys, very orthodox guys. You were there under the old regime.
I was.
And it was a very different. So you didn't get a seminary education that was, we say, particularly solid.
No, I was trained by Bardians.
So where did you get your theology from? How did you compensate for that?
So I was trained by Bardians. One of my systematic theology professors was a process theologian. All of the faculty members, except one, that were instructors of mine at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, when house cleaning came about a year after I graduated in '94, all but one ended up in mainline seminaries. Disciples of Christ, United Methodist, PCUSA, and American Baptist. So these were the people who were teaching me. And some of them were a little guarded while they were at Midwestern, but they didn't have to be super guarded during those years. And a lot of, I mean, I saw guys abandon the faith during that time because they learned in some of their classes that you really couldn't trust large portions of Scripture, quote unquote, you know. And so I graduated with guys who no longer believed. I graduated with guys who had become very progressive, and they weren't before they came to seminary. God was very kind to me. He was very gracious. He guarded my mind, guarded my heart during those years. And it was really during my last year of seminary that I started picking up Luther and Calvin and just started reading them. We read around them some, but I just took it upon myself to start going to primary sources. And from there, I started reading Reformed theologians. I would not have considered myself even a Calvinist at that point, but I believed that I should read Luther. I believed that I should read Calvin. And then from there, I went on to some of the Puritans. And from there, I went on, you know, I went from the Puritans to J.I. Packer. Oftentimes it's the other way around.
The great J.I. Packer.
And he had an enormous influence on me.
Likewise.
Enormous, yeah. And when I read, I read Knowing God, I read Speaking, I read Fundamentalism, the Word of God, which was very good because it was a counter to some of the things I was hearing from some of my seminary professors.
Brilliantly concise as well.
Very helpful to me, you bet. And so those things began to really tinker with my theology. And so in a lot of ways, you know, I came by Reformed theology, covenant theology, by my own reading. I never sat in a classroom where I was taught covenant theology. It was listening to online lectures from Reformed Theological Seminary and reading the books that these guys were reading after my last year of seminary and after I graduated. And so it, you know, it went from doctrines of grace, and I was a happy Calvinistic Baptist for a while, then covenant theology. And it wasn't until then, finally, that the final domino for me was church governance. And I was serving in a non-denominational church that that baptized babies. You know, and so I was, and my predecessors had been Calvinist men, but it was a non-denominational church. And I ordered a copy of the Book of Church Order, and I began to study the Book of Acts, paying a special attention to the organization of the apostles and how the church was organized. And I saw Presbyterianism.
This is the PCA Book of Church Order. Like in a ring bind with like 1,500 pages.
Because it's not inspired.
Love, man.
Because
that is love.
It's not inspired.
It certainly isn't. It's not inspiring either, I would say.
But you know what was great about that? What was great about that is I was reading and working through portions of the Book of Church Order. I thought, why isn't everybody else doing something at least like this?
Yeah, why isn't it possible to actually have procedures that
Exactly.
protect congregations and protect pastors?
Right.
They're not always applied properly.
But when it's applied, it actually well. And just anecdotally, when we do our Welcome to Covenant class, our 11-week membership class, the people who are coming to us from broadly evangelical churches, they are particularly moved, not just interested in, but moved by the section on church governance.
Yeah.
Because they'd never seen kind of the layers of accountability and help and support and correction and those kinds of things. So that was huge for me. And that was the final straw where I knew I had to be a Presbyterian.
Wow. Well, this might lead me to my final question then. And you may just have answered it, but you may want to give a supplement or perhaps a different answer. Is that what is the one thing that you wished you'd known, that you know now, that you wished you had known the day you were ordained to ministry, but you didn't know?
Yeah. Okay, so that's a hard question. For whatever reason, I don't know why this popped into my mind first. And it may seem...
I wish you'd known. Exactly. My mate Trueman.
Right,
Is that
exactly. I'm very grateful for my upbringing. I'm very grateful. I heard the gospel growing up in my Southern Baptist church. I heard the gospel very clearly. I heard justification by grace through faith alone. Very grateful for that. Having now been in a Presbyterian Reformed church for a dozen years, and having been reading Reformed resources for far longer than that, I wish that I had, I wish that my theological upbringing had been covenant theology. I wish that I'd been catechized in that as a kid around a kitchen table.
Right.
But when I was younger, when I was in youth group in college and going to a Christian college, the word catechism would have been a bad word. That was quote Roman Catholic. I look at the families in our church who lovingly catechize their children, and I think, I wish I had known that. I had wished I had known that, and what kind of impact that might have made, and how that would have made me a more mature, more wise minister in my first years of ministry.
Interesting.
But I think I could have answered that in a lot of ways, but for whatever reason, that popped into my mind first.
Interesting.
So, anyway, yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure interviewing you, Todd. I want to say to our listeners, friendship is a valuable thing, as Todd has commented. And I think a life where the Lord gives you 3, 4, 5 really good friends is a blessed life indeed. And I'm joking aside, very much appreciate the friendship of Todd over these many, many years.
And when you go through battles together and have to be in foxholes for a while, you also there's something that connects you in that way.
Yeah. So, well, please visit our website, mortificationofspin.org. If Todd had ever actually written anything, we would have something to give away to you at this point. But I'm thinking maybe we could do a few 8x10 glossies that Todd signed. You could hang on your wall or something like that, or stick on your dartboard.
Maybe a mug, a Mortification of Spin mug.
We may have some mugs. Go to our website and see if we have anything to give away this time.
There's going to be some impressive swag. Let's put it that way.
We're actually giving away some signed Mortification of Spin posters.
And they are lovely.
They're lovely, and they're actually signed by Todd Pruitt and myself.
And Carl Trueman.
So they will be worth, I don't know.
I hate to even speculate
on eBay.
I mean, think of. We're talking Beanie Baby money here, folks.
Yeah.
So
we were actually thinking earlier, just listeners, of producing cloths with Todd's face on them, claiming that they'd been miraculously formed. And if you look at the Todd face and it scowls at you, then you need to repent. If you look at the Todd face and it smiles at you, then you receive.
You're in good standing.
You receive the blessing. But If you would like to make a donation,
And why wouldn't you?
Please do. Yes. If we reach $1 million, we'll actually close the podcast down. So that may be an incentive for giving very generously. If you want us off the air, give generously, and we will go away. Now, seriously, we are a listener-supported podcast. If you feel led to make a donation, please do so. In the meantime, all that remains is for me to thank my friend Todd Pruitt for being such a good-spirited, good-humored guest today, and to thank you, the listeners, for tuning in, and we will look forward to being with you next time.
Just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on.
Thanks for listening to Mortification of Spin, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. For more on topics like this, visit mortificationofspin.org, where you can find other articles by Carl and Todd, browse the archive of past episodes, and make a donation. We'll talk to you next time on Mortification of Spin.